Heyo kidlets! Welcome to your integers notes. Make sure that you put the date. Make sure that you put not my name, haha, your own name. Mine is Tara Woodyard. So, integers can be difficult, but if you split the operations in two, it can be a little easier. So when I say split it in two, I'm saying, okay, group one is adding and subtracting. If you just flip over to the other side, we have multiplication and division as our second split. We're going to also talk about combination questions, so combining kind of multiplication and addition and multiplication, division, addition and subtraction kind of all in one, not in a BEDMAS way, but you'll see what I mean by that. So that's kind of our third section. But when we go up to the top here, let's just focus here on addition and subtraction. Now here, number lines can be your best friend. I find this a very helpful tool, and eventually it will just become so natural to you that you don't need to worry about a number line. But we're gonna write down a number line just for this here. So starting at 0, and going in the positive direction and going in the negative direction. Now, if you would like to have one that extends from positive 15 to negative 15, just come on and talk to me, and I can give you one of those. So I'm just going to write down. So if this is 0 here, one tick away is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Now if I wanted to go up by a different number, if I wanted to say go up by 2s, I could say this is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So I can use, don't worry about writing that down though. So I can use this number line for much bigger numbers than just using this for 1. So I'm going to go in the negative direction. As long as you're going down by the same or going up by the same every single tick mark, you can use the number line in that way. Negative 5, not negative 4. That's a very common mistake. I'm kind of glad that I made that. Negative 6, negative 7, negative 8, negative 9, and negative 10. So you can use this so you don't have to draw it every single time. Oh my goodness, what a headache. But again, like I said, if you wanted to have one that was a little bit bigger, come and talk to me. So how do we use the number line? First, start with the first number. Okay? Then move the number of paces of the second number. So if the sign is addition, move right. If the sign is subtraction, move left. So let's apply these rules to these questions here. So 5 plus 2. I'm going to start at the first number at 5. And I'm going to move 2 paces. And since it's plus, I'm going to move right. So 1 and 2. So that is 7. Okay, that's great. Now moving to the next one here. Negative 2 plus 5. So that means we're going to be going to the right because it's plus 5, but we're starting at negative 2. So I'm starting at negative 2 here, and I'm adding 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to be positive 3. Now I can either write the answer 3 or I can say positive 3. Doesn't matter, whichever one works for you. Okay, so the first number here is 2. Oh, so is negative 2, so I'm going to start at negative 2. And I'm going to move 7 paces, but the subtraction sign is, the sign is subtraction, so we're going to be moving left. We're going to be moving left 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the answer here is negative 9. Five minus 2. Now that's just a regular question, but let's just use the number line here. Like there are no negatives that are involved. The only thing that's negative is that subtraction sign. So you start at 5 and you subtract 2, so you are at positive 3. But here I'm going to change this on you. You start at 2 and you move left 5 paces. So we're starting at 2 and we're moving left 5 paces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's going to end up at negative 3. So I'm sure that you've heard things like a negative and a negative is a positive, okay? But in in addition and subtraction, that simply isn't the case, okay? So I'm just going to show you an example here. This is a negative and a negative number, okay? And it comes out to a negative number. So when people say a negative and a negative is positive, that is what is coming in multiplication and division rules, okay? With addition and subtraction, seriously, your best friend is the number line. Another key thing is you have to see what the first number is and then compare the second number and see, and then you can estimate if it's going to be positive or negative. So I'm starting out at 5 and I'm subtracting 2. So I know that my answer is going to be positive because 5 is bigger than 2. Now if you take the flip side here, I'm starting out at 2 and I'm subtracting 5. Well, 5 is bigger than 2 and I'm subtracting it from 2, so I know it's going to be less than 0. That, what I just told you right now, is kind of like just a little tip, a little trick that you can do right before starting a question. However, if that kind of confused you a little bit, don't worry, the number line is going to work every time. So I'm just going to say works every time. You can always draw a number line on the top of a test or on top of a mastery check or anything like that. Okay, so moving on to multiplication and division. This is the place where we can say a negative and a negative are positive. Oh, don't forget those quotation marks. I'll change that in your copy. So the multiplication with negative rules. And what I would also like to add here, and division. So if I were to have a negative times a negative, that would result in a positive answer. Just like if I would say negative divided by a negative would result in a positive answer. Or if I were to say a negative times a positive, that would result in a negative number. Just like a negative divided by a positive would result in a negative number. Now, if I were to take a positive and multiply it by a negative, what do you think the answer would be? If you said negative, you're totally right. Just like if you would have a positive number and you would divide it by a negative number, that would result in a negative number. Last but not least, we have a positive times a positive. That results in a positive number. Just like a positive divided by a positive is going to result in a positive number too. It's worth just taking a moment here to say that there are lots of different signs for multiplication. Okay? These are all saying the same thing. 2 times 3. 2 times 3. Okay, so the brackets don't matter. Okay, you can have brackets with multiplication. Brackets often just hold on to a negative, as you can see here. Like this right here just makes you know that for sure it's -2 instead of, say, something like subtracting 2. Another sign for multiplication would be the dot, so 2.3. Another way that we could see multiplication is simply brackets, 2 and then 3. These are all 6. Because these are all different ways to express multiplication. So in the next examples, I kind of tried, whenever multiplication came up, I tried to use a different way. So some examples here of multiplication and division with negatives. So negative 2 times 3, we have a negative and a positive. That's going to be negative 6 because of this rule right here. This one. Negative 3 times 2, well, that's still going to be negative 6. What about this one? 12 divided by negative 3. Well, you know that my sign is going to be negative because there's one negative here. 12 divided by 3 is going to be 4, so it's going to be negative 4. Now, sometimes we don't have the brackets that are helping us out. You'll notice in Math IXL it gets a little confusing, and I'll bring up Math IXL just so that you can see what I mean. But you don't necessarily need to have the brackets holding in that negative. Sometimes visually it's just nicer to see. So negative 12 divided by 3, I know it's going to be negative because I have an odd number of negatives, or one negative. 12 divided by 3 is 4. Negative 2 times, because remember this means multiplication because of that. Negative 2 times negative 3, a negative times a negative. Negative times a negative is a positive. So we're going to have positive, positive 6. Same thing here, a negative divided by a negative. Just like this right here. A negative divided by a negative is positive. So negative 12 divided by negative 4, it's going to be positive. 12 divided by 4 is 3. And we're done. Now, in Math IXL, you're going to get a few of these questions, and they're combination questions because you're kind of seeing two signs beside each other. Now, in this case, what I want you to do always is, this gets a little bit tricky, so I want you to make sure that you write down, take out your notebook, and write down your notes beside you as you do your Math IXL. So if I were to rewrite this one, what is making my brain hurt is this positive and negative. Now I say it's a combination question because this essentially is saying a positive times a negative. So when you have a positive and a negative beside each other, it becomes negative. But I'm not going to leave it like that. I'm going to rewrite it, and I'm going to say negative 2 minus 5. And if you were to take out your number line, which I could scroll up and grab, but you can have the number line right beside you. Negative 2 minus 5 is negative 7. Now, here is another thing. Negative beside a negative, that's going to be positive. So when I rewrite this, because it's less confusing, I'm going to say 3 plus 7. Well, that's just a very normal question. You've been doing those for a long time. 3 plus 7 is 10. Last but not least, we have two signs beside each other. Negative beside a negative becomes positive. I'm going to rewrite it though, because it will give me practice in that, and it'll help me show my work better. So minus 4 plus 3. Let me just write this one here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you start out at negative 4 and you add 3. 1, 2, 3. It's still on the left side of the 0, so I know, and it's 1 away. So I know it's going to be negative 1. So the Math IXL practice that you can be doing here is grade 7, B1. This is understanding integers, so knowing when a negative is appropriate and when a positive is appropriate. Grade 8, C3, this is adding and subtracting. And grade 8, C7, this one right here is multiplying and dividing. So what I would love to do right now is just to show you what I mean by showing your work. So if I were to bring up Math IXL, this one right here. So I'm going to pretend that this is my sheet of paper that I'm working at. This is my notebook here. And it says right here, subtract. I'm in grade 8 C3, which is something that you would be doing. So if I were to say, okay, I'm just going to write down the question, 9 minus 10. Now, what I don't love about Math IXL is that they don't put the brackets around, but you'll be able to manage it. You know that this is a negative beside a negative. So when I write that down, I say, ew, a negative beside a negative. It's going to be negative 9 plus 10. Because I have two negatives beside each other, that becomes a plus. But I'm going to show my work because it makes it easier. So if I start out at negative 9 and I add 10, that just becomes positive 1. Because I'm starting out with a negative number that is a little bit less than 10. And I'm adding 10 to it, so it'll bring it over to the positives. Now, here's another thing. I can, as long as I take the sign with it, I can switch the order of this one. Negative 9 plus 10 is the same as positive 10 minus 9. And that's something that we can do a little bit easy in our head. 10 minus 9, that's just positive 1. That's almost easier to see. So now I'm going to go into Math IXL, and I'm going to type in 1. Oh, just get my keyboard here. Submit it. Awesome. Now this one's easy. 8 minus 6 is going to be 2. Negative 7 plus 9 is going to also be 2. Negative 8 minus 7 is going to be negative 15. 8 plus 4, that's a simple one, 12. Now here's another one that I want us to write down again. So this one right here, negative 8 plus negative 1 equals, so I have this right here, a positive and a negative beside each other becomes a negative. So I'm going to rewrite it, negative 8 minus 1 equals negative 9, because you start out at negative 8 and then move to the left 1, which means it's negative 9. So I hope this gives you a clear sense of what I'm expecting when you're using your notebook. The writing down of the questions really helps you understand it, and I think that in the long run it'll save you some frustration, just because when you're doing all of the stuff in your head, it's like having a browser with way too many tabs open. Okay? If you write it down, you can kind of organize your thoughts better, and in the long run it will save you time, because you'll feel less frustrated.